My name is Michael Stewart, and I'm studying human-computer interaction at Virginia Tech within the computer science department. I participated in the GPP program in the spring of 2011. I got very lucky because during the weekend that I came for recruitment, there was a great guy named Amin Shigani who was driving our van, and I was telling him how part of the reason I'm coming to grad school is because I'm very interested in teaching. And he said, "Oh, you think you want to be a professor?" And I said, "Yeah." And he says, "Well, I've been participating in this future professoriate program," and he told me all about it, and eventually he told me also about having gone to Switzerland. So it was really cool to hear about that stuff, and that's kind of how I first heard about it, and that was part of my reason for choosing Virginia Tech was because I said, well, if they care enough about education that they also try to prepare people to go into faculty instead of just to know how to do research, this could be a good place to be. So that's kind of when I first heard of the program, and then I pursued my first year a nomination for a teaching fellowship. And this teaching fellowship is structured such that some of the requirements of the fellowship are in line also with the future professoriate program. And so really my early experience at Virginia Tech has kind of all been leading towards this experience. So then getting to take the future professoriate class with the dean and really understanding some of the structure of U.S. education and some of the topical issues there, and even just where to find what the news is and what's going on in higher education, and to meet people that are interested enough that they want to talk about it and learn these things. That was a really great start. And then wanting to teach, part of my interest in teaching is that I had some great teachers in my education and then I had some that were not so great. And I really thought that, I wanted there to be more like the ones that had done so well with me. And so I thought maybe I could become one of those people. And so to take the pedagogy course with Shelley was really awesome. She really works so hard to make that course a great experience, and then the people in the class all participating and everything is wonderful. And so those were a great foundation to then coming abroad and getting to continue the conversation with people here. Having never been out of the country before getting to go on the trip last year, I really did not know what to expect. Anybody who has an opportunity to travel will typically come back and tell anyone who's willing to listen about how they had a great time and that things are very different. So broadly, I guess you could say I expected to have a great time and to experience things that are very different, but it's very difficult to explain to somebody what's different. I think it's very personal, the things that you notice that are different. For me, something that was, I noticed that most of the windows across Switzerland and much of Netherlands are the same. They have this way they open and they lean and they close and they lock. And I was like, the US, we have pretty standard windows, but there's so many different vendors, they vary pretty widely in homes. And I was like, wow, this random thing I noticed that's held pretty consistent here. But then, just coming here and my expectations being that I would learn about some of the Swiss higher education and that I would get to talk to people. I didn't know exactly who to be talking to. I knew people in the administration, but I also didn't know what was their perspective. Having gone through these classes where we've been looking at the structure and thinking critically about issues that are important in the U.S., for example, ever decreasing state budgets, and then state institutions, of course, having ever rising research costs, and how can we work with that problem, and then wondering about how can professors keep time to do research and teaching when they need to be spending so much time winning grants. And I was thinking that maybe some of these issues would be similar in Switzerland, but then we came to see that many institutions here are proud about how little outside funding they receive outside of their canton, and that they prefer to keep it that way because they think it's important to keep the focus on teaching and research time. And so that was a very interesting thing to learn while I was here. First of all, the trip, the dean very specifically structures it where she gives us a deadline by which to be at a particular place to start the whole trip. And so, she helps purchase the flight ticket, and then she just says, be at the Hotel St. Joseph by this time on this date. And that was a pretty interesting way to start out. It means that we have to already figure out at least how to get from whichever airport we fly into over to this hotel. And as somebody who had never traveled abroad before, that was an exciting challenge in and of itself. And it turned out to be rather simple. But just to, get off a plane and realize, I think at that point I had to ride a train to Zurich from the airport, and then to just kind of walk through this city, first time walking around another country and just seeing the streets and the people and how few people were using cell phones as we were walking around town, and just eventually having some trouble finding the thing. It's up on this hill, and finally figuring it out. It was just pretty interesting. So I was already in a place of recognizing that things are different, and that just until I learn kind of how things work, just getting around is going to be a challenge in and of itself. That made me think a little bit about students that I might have in my classes that are coming from other countries, or even if they're just from our own country, just coming from different cultures. It really helped me think back to, how some of the things that different people might take for granted could prove stressful or challenging to different parties. And so that was a nice perspective to have at the start of the trip, because we're going to be going to these schools and talking to the different faculty about the challenge that their universities and things. And, it just to realize that really we're all taking a lot for granted in these conversations, and to try to be conscious of that so we can, try to tease things apart was an interesting starting point. So I'm a little sold on the school of thought. I think there are many of us who think about knowledge as constructed. It's not something that's out there. There's like truth to be discovered necessarily, but there's, a process by which we, hopefully very rigorously observe and work on things, and kind of come to an educated decision about what we think is knowledge. And so the reason that that's an important thing to think about in the context of especially the global perspectives is that if you think about the fact that I'm a constructor of knowledge and I have never been out of the US, then I can only have so much perspective. If I don't even recognize something as able to have an alternative, then how can I know, how I feel about the way it is in my life? Knowing the United States education system a little bit from our courses and the higher education, and seeing how, for example, state universities, the state budgets are declining, and so they were looking for other ways to fund research and fund the schools. And one of the things that they're doing is increasing the amount of grant funding in a lot of departments. And the fact that one of the biggest research institutes in the world, in Zurich, ETH, they're opposed to increasing their external funding past a very small percentage. And so I would have never thought that there would be institutions of higher education that even had that as a concern. It's a simple thing. We need more funding. Where's it going to come from? Okay, we'll have to go for some grants. And it wouldn't have occurred to me that it was possible to have an alternative view. I mean, basically it could have been, we need to convince the state to give us more money, or it could be, we'll go for grants. And granted, ETH doesn't actually have to solve this problem right now because their Canton funding is still very strong. But the fact that they even are considering what it would cost their institution from a quality of teaching, quality of research standpoint to take more external funding was a very interesting way to think about things. Then additionally, I mentioned earlier that there weren't that many people using cell phones in Switzerland. Some of my work, I'm going to be interested in looking at how people interact with technologies that are kind of ubiquitous, that enable communication. And, my perspective from being in and around America is, only so broad. And to see that in a country that has approximately 200% cell phone subscriptions in their population, that they just really aren't using them in public. That's a cultural difference that is very important to the implications for what kind of research I would do. So knowing that is going to help my dissertation work, and that's very important. Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the things throughout Global Perspectives and also contemporary pedagogy that we've been talking about is just trying to keep classes kind of authentic and relatable to the students. I think most educators would understand that could be a concern. And so one of the things I would do in my courses is try to tie whatever subject matter we're talking about to something that's even outside of computer science, which is my field. And so try to tie it to either current events or try to tie it to other courses that they could or might actually be taking simultaneously. And the point of that is to give them something else to relate things to. If the person happens to be really just super interested in computer science and has no problem motivating themselves to work on something, then maybe they don't need any kind of extra motivator, and that's fine. They're going to do just fine in the class. But then for the other people that feel like computer science is just one piece of their life or something like that, I like to show them how the different things that I teach relate to maybe some of the other parts of their lives. So, in order to do that, we have to ask our students who they are very early in the semester, so you have some information to tie these things to. But coming abroad here to Switzerland, I just have a different perspective from a different country, and so the questions that I ask them to get to know who they are will now be a little different. I'll recognize that something could be different between my students that I might have taken for granted before. And so in knowing who they are, I can tie things better. And then also just thinking even more about the world's current events now. Just having gotten out of the country for some reason, I guess, I wonder what's happening with Switzerland, what's happening with the EU over here. And so kind of tying in some of our work to what happens with those places. I would absolutely recommend the program to people who are interested in becoming educators. A lot of the people, even in the computer science department that are in the PhD program, just want to go and do research, and that's fine. Not that I don't think they would benefit from such a thing, but I think that really for me, a lot of the biggest benefits are because I have an interest in a future in higher education. I intend to try to have a similar program at whatever school I go to eventually. I mean, I don't know how long it'll be till I'm in the dean's position to budget it and make it happen, but I'll definitely push for, pedagogy courses and graduate education, and eventually try to have some kind of program very similar to this one. So I would absolutely say that people should consider this program and that they'll learn so much. Just the opportunity, it's one thing to take the classes back in the States as preparation, but then having the opportunity to stop doing my research, my teaching, my chores at my home, and everything else, and to just for this week and a half to be part of this program and thinking about this, talking about this the whole time is a really awesome opportunity. So you just learned so much in that very short period of time.